In a world in which black men continue to be a threat, but are free, that we must invent mechanisms of control in order to control their bodies, and so terror lynchings, for instance, becomes a thing, right? We call this individual the black male buck. So again, this is an individual who is perceived primarily through criminality, having an insatiable appetite for black women, white women rather. And so we still see this caricature and the stereotype manifest in a lot of the popular culture that we consume today. The main thing is that we have a very narrow understanding of what black masculinity is and what it can look like. A lot of that has to do, on the one end, with the fact that a lot of these representations are just a continuation of age-old stereotypes, but second, the ways in which some people have sought to respond to it through this discourse of positivity has ended up just essentially reimagining black masculinity through approximating ideas about white patriarchy, right? And obviously that's detrimental. We ourselves, as audience members, are implicated in terms of the types of media that we are exposed to, because we go and buy it, right? We go and watch The Blind Side or Freedom Writers or Avatar and all the movies that have sort of these really problematic racial undertones that situate white people on top as benevolent, and then black people of color on the bottom as people who need to be saved. So that's to say that I do recognize that there is definitely resistive potential in the media that we consume. I think it has a lot to do with who's producing the media. And I am interested to see what the long-term impact is with sites like TikTok, since they do give individuals the power to sort of create.
What are we actually going to do as people of color to tell our stories? Because I grew up in a black community. It's a very unique and amazing experience. I mean, the reality is we as black people have always been sensational. We're the most envied and hated people at the same time. You watch CNN 30 years ago, then all of a sudden they're talking about finna, can't, such and such bling. We created that. We're the fashion icons. We're the people who create all the creativity. But they hate us. And I've never understood why we suddenly lowered ourselves to decide to let them tell our stories. May rest in peace, but Brother Singleton, who made Boys in the Hood and Rosewood, his movies became popular because they actually tell the story of the way the world actually is from the non-white perspective. There is absolutely no black experience that's ever occurred that hasn't been met with an equal or stronger rebuff from whites. You look, for example, as right after slavery ended, do you know when the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan was formed? Same year the Civil War ended, 1865. Right after we got, say, for example, desegregation of schools, then all of a sudden you start getting all these private schools in the South that became really big. Right after Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, but that wasn't the end of it. Now, instead of, hey, you know what? Black Lives Matter, right after George Floyd got killed, we have this great turn of events. No. Now we're deciding we don't even want you to talk about, teach, or know anything about your own history in the schools. We're going to make laws to do it. That's where we are. So we should stop relying on them to tell our stories and just be like, we're telling it. Don't like it, don't listen. But we know for certain, based on what we've done with music, what we've done with art, what we've done with basketball, football, etc., if we do it, you're going to be interested and you're going to watch. The majority of the population right now, despite the fears of having a black planet, is still white. And increasingly with these balkanized communities where whites hang out with whites, blacks hang out with blacks, etc., what sells is going to be what sells to the majority, and the majority likes to see themselves. So I really seriously don't think big corporations are going to change anything because they don't have to, which is why they're still in business in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Right. I mean, there's an audience already for the things, the types of media that they're already producing, and so I think it takes sort of a reckoning with ourselves and in terms of our own implicature in these sorts of things, that the movies that we decide to watch and the films that we invest in and the music that we listen to. If we want to make a sort of a material change in that way, then we need to think about ourselves, because there needs to not be a market then, right, for these sorts of problematic media, and so as long as there's no incentive to change whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, Black Panther wasn't amazingly successful by accident. I mean, black folks went to see that thing like it was, like it was water and they were in the Sahara. So when we start watching and following movies that we like, that's when all of a sudden there'll become many more of the same types of movies.
As you know, a lot of my work is also in the area of hip-hop studies. And you can see the ways in which that hip-hop has evolved and shifted based on whatever the ongoing sort of social, political climate was. So, following 2012, 2013, with the murder of Trayvon Martin and the emergence of Black Lives Matter, we see a lot of music artists all of a sudden who are making socially conscious music and things like that, right? So even then you have to be skeptical too, because it's all ultimately like white dudes, executives, like realizing, wait a second, this social conscious thing is something that we can make money off of as well, right? And so that's ambivalent, right? Because on the one end, it's the commodification of social consciousness, but also, right, some of those representations are important representations and the sorts of things that I think can have a great impact on not just Black Americans that are engaged in hip hop, but also white Americans who are engaged in hip hop too. But in terms of disconnecting it though from the system of capitalism, I don't think that is possible. But I definitely think that we live in a society where media conglomerates, music industry does a great job at sort of reading what is in and what isn't, and sometimes what is in is resistance and social protest and all those sorts of things, and you can make money off of that. I think Black Panther was, in some ways, sort of a symptom of that as well, right? I mean, ultimately, that's a Disney movie too, right? Disney made it, so it's ambivalent. Mm-hmm. It's messy.